Oh my god. Stuff's getting real old. Scott. What's going on, Scott? Southern Baptist Church to sell headquarters in Nashville amid legal expenses from abuse investigation. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. $31.7 million. $8 million to construct. 40 years ago. That's insane. Good God. That's wild. Ghost. Oh, here, let me turn the Discord thingy on here. Alright, Discord is open. Yeah, wild stuff going on in the old news there. If you're watching this later, we have a Discord. This is the Discord. There's a link to the Discord pinned in the live chat. There's also links to the Discord in the description of every video on the YouTube channel and on all social media. So it's not hard to find. Probably, depending on who you are, I guess. It's not hard to find. Join the Discord. It's lovely, full of lovely people. It's a lot of fun. I feel like I don't even need to pitch it anymore. It's just fabulous. It is what it is. Pastora is just like all butterflies, man. It's like all flowers and butterflies when Pastora arrives. Mikkel. She is here. So beautiful. What a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing. I'm excited to get into 26 here this lovely evening because I'm curious on some of your opinions on whether, how do I say it? On whether it actually happened at all. The entire section, the entire story, because of how much of a parallel it is. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, we'll get there. So just take that as a cliffhanger, I guess. We're on 25 and 26. Carrot cake. I like carrot cake. A lot of people don't. Gotta grab. Oh, because Mikkel's getting carrot cake. Good for you. Not a lot of people like carrot cake. From my anecdotal experience, I like carrot cake. It's good. It's weird, but it's good. It's good stuff. Okay. 25. Abraham's death and his descendants. I'm going to skip some of the stuff that is irrelevant, so if you want to read it yourself, you definitely can. But Abraham took another wife. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what Rodriguez has been waiting for, and she's not even going to be here because from what I can tell in Discord, she is being a heathen at a Raiders game. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it, but it sounds like she chose football over God. But I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that because that would be rude. But this is what she brought up like weeks ago. And at least I was like, dang, I haven't thought about that. But that's absolutely accurate. And then I think Mikkel fact-checked it in the middle. Because I didn't remember. I honestly just like, not even close to the top of mind, that Abraham did remarry. And then popped out a bunch more of his nation. Didn't even think about it. But totally happened, and here it is. This is what we've been waiting for. Too bad she's a heathen at the Raiders game. Kelsey, hey. So Abraham took another wife. Earlier, if Abraham is old, like wildly old, which was the issue with the promise the entire time. Abraham the entire time and Sarah were like, this is ridiculous. This is a joke. They literally laughed in the face of God, like literally in the face of God. Laughed at him because he was talking about giving them children at the age they were talking about. The children were the obstacle. Now, not only did all of that happen, but now he's going to take another wife. And he's going to have a slew of more children. A quiver plus one, you might say. And this is that. Her name was Keturah. Good night. Are you going to bed? I'm jealous if you're going to bed. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, which is controversial, Ishbak, and Shua. Midian is controversial because of this. This is from Logos. The term here refers to the land of Midian, which was in northwest Arabia, east of the Gulf of Aqaba, I don't know. As a clan or a confederacy of clans, the Midianites, which is what most people are familiar with, were located in a widespread area from Midian to the northern border of Egypt, which makes sense if you think about it, and you think about some of the rest of the Old Testament. Midianite traders purchased Joseph from his brothers and sold him to the Ishmaelites. So this is a beautiful example of when you aggregate some of the data in the Old Testament, you can learn something that you definitely just read right past. You just read right past it. Because we have this ability, we're able to kind of put the full picture together. Ishbak. The descendants of Ishbak are likely the North Syrian tribe of Ayasbak. I don't know. I'm not the pronunciation guy. Mentioned in Assyrian sources, which is interesting because it's another thing. If you didn't look into Assyrian sources, and honestly, it's been many years since I've read anything from like that I can think of. But we're able to add some context to that too. So they are likely the North Syrian tribe that is mentioned in many of the Assyrian sources of the same time. Jokshan fathered Sheba and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Ashurim, Letushim, and Leumim. We're going to go with that. Ashurim. Elsewhere in the Old Testament, this term refers to Assyrians, which again, I looked into a bit. Makes sense. Here in Logos, though, it says, continuing. However, based on chronology, where Assyria is already referred to as a region, because it was in chapter 18, as well as ancient Near Eastern sources from the origin of Assyria, it seems that Assyrians are not being referenced here, because it could get confused for that. As is the case with other people terms, the people terms, like the Hittites, which I think was last week. Another group of people was likely known by this term. So just as to not get them confused, or not as confused, perhaps at least. The sons of Midian were Ipah, Epher, Hanak, Ibadah, and Ildah. All these were the children of Keturah. So these were all Abraham's newest wife, her children. Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. This is important to remember because this is from the promise, which is it's the groundwork of all of Genesis, basically, past the beginning of Genesis. God chose Abraham to inherit, and then Isaac was the chosen one by God to inherit next, to continue on the covenant that God made with Abraham. And it's extremely important because this concept is going to continue really, really hard through the next 2 chapters. Verse 6, but to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts. Actually, I'll come back to that. To the sons of the concubines, Abraham gave gifts, and while he was still living, he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the east country, which I believe was also last week when we read about that. And also happened previously with Hagar. Abraham wanted to make dang sure that the promise would stay in line, because Isaac through Sarah and needed to be manifested, and he had to be where he needed to be. The location is super important, and again, that will be something that will repeatedly come up in the next 2 chapters. The significance of the location. So eastward to the east country. These are the days of the years of Abraham's life, 175. And if you do the math does in fact math. At 75 years old is when the call happened, when God came to Abraham back in chapter 12. And then at 100 years old is when Isaac was born, which was essentially the fulfillment of the promise in a sense. Not in absolute, but in a sense for sure. Graves, what's going on? Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years. And he was gathered to his people. I wanted to read this. The Hebrew phrase is used only, the Hebrew phrase is used here, and was gathered to his people, is used only in the Pentateuch, and it likely refers to death itself, with the presumption of being reunited in the afterlife with family or ancestors. So two things there, really, if you think about it. The fact that it's only found in the Pentateuch is significant. And then the secondary significance to me, in my opinion, is that there's the presumption of being reunited with family in the afterlife with family or ancestors. It wasn't the general belief for many Jews. So it's something that you kind of have to leave the Bible to learn more about, in my opinion. You can find a lot more information on that, the belief system around that, of some Jews, certainly not all. And then some of that makes more sense. But I thought that was kind of interesting, that it doesn't show up beyond the Pentateuch. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, east of Mamre, the field that Abraham purchased from the Hittites. Then Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac his son, and Isaac settled at Beer Leroy. Not reading the red underline because it just gets old. It's just names. If you care, if you're a geek, then look it up when we're done. And I did note all of this in Discord. So at the end of Genesis, if we do want to come back and dig through some of this, because I have notes, I just feel most people don't care. If we do want to come back and dig into some of this, the names, references, geography, things like that, then we can do that. I just don't want to waste anybody's time if they're not interested, because it's not super important. And if it is, I'll point it out and I'll definitely talk about it. The birth of Esau and Jacob starts to get good here, in my opinion. Starts to get good. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel and Aramean and Padan Aram, the sister of Laban and Aramean. Maybe name meanings. Good. I have them. At least I have all of what I've collected over the years. So unless anything is dramatically changed, I should have it all. Because some of it is really interesting. Some of it really, really is. Especially back, I think, in 18. Some of it is really interesting. I'm not sure what the number of people that really care to get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff is. But I'm 100% down, because I think it's really interesting. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. This is where you begin, or you have to begin, to really mentally log parallels. So I'll say it now and I'll make it super clear. From this point forward, try to use your brain to grasp when you feel like we've been here before. Kind of like what we experienced when reading Adam and Eve on Thursdays. It just seems like we're going in a circle. This is definitely different, but it's got some of that vibe to it. So start paying attention now and try to make little mental flags of when we've been here before. This sounds familiar. So Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Sounds familiar a little bit. Sounds like something we've experienced in the past. A little bit. Prayer granted, wife conceived. The children struggled together within her. What does that mean? There's children in her. Huh. And she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" And so she went to inquire of the Lord. I really want to read this. Nailed it. I really want to read this because this is really interesting. So here in the purple, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? The Hebrew for this phrase is not complete. It reads, quote, "If so, why then am I ... end quote. Some words were likely dropped out of the traditional Hebrew text. Later revisions of the Old Testament reflecting a different textual tradition finish with "why do I go on living?" The Hebrew text is incomplete without this line. The later version of this was Aramaic, where we began to add back in what was left incomplete, which is just interesting. And then if you even take what the revision ended up being, why do I go on living? It differs from what I have here, which is the ESV, and I also looked at the NIV, and I also looked at the NASB, and I looked at a few others, and they're all slightly different. And it's not that it's essential, it doesn't matter really, but it is certainly an interesting thing to look at if you're weird and if you care. If it is thus, why is this happening to me? The revision, which is not even the accurate translation because we don't have it. The revision originally was, why do I go on living? Which is a different statement. It's a different thing that is being said. What I wonder is why both of those, even the earlier translation, doesn't, in my opinion, really make sense with the original that dropped off. Because the original in Hebrew that was incomplete was, if so, why then am I ... Maybe it's just me. Maybe you guys are reading it and you're like, that makes sense. I think it makes sense. To me, it does not. It is verse 22 in chapter 25. I am weird and I care. Okay, well, good. I know we've got a handful of us, at least, that will be down to read literal name after name after name and get into some of the meanings, and if they're just wordplay, where these people came from or where we think they came from. There's a little bit of it in here that we are going to talk about because it matters, but a lot of it is just irrelevant. Aren't we all a bit weird here? It's fair enough. Okay, so anyways, if that's something you're interested in, look into it. It's interesting if nothing else. She went to inquire of the Lord. She went to seek guidance, is what is being said, right? So according to verse 11, Isaac and Rebekah were living in Beer Lahai-roi, the place where Hagar encountered the angel of Yahweh. That was back in 16. So again, just thinking parallels, because we've already had 3 by my count. She's seeking guidance from the Lord in the very place that Hagar encountered Yahweh back in chapter 16. Rebekah may have been aware of it, perhaps, or maybe not. And maybe it is just a blind parallel, which is common. Or maybe is it not literal? These are the things that you have to think about. I am not pushing any interpretation whatsoever. So she's going to inquire with the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, which was alluded to earlier when it said that the children struggled within her. Well, children is plural, and a child, I guess you could say, doesn't necessarily struggle with itself inside of you. So she's having twins. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people from within you shall be divided. An obvious reference to there will be a rivalry. There will be issues here. Things are not going to be content among the siblings. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger, which is just significant because that's not normal, right? Especially in this culture at this time, or any culture at that time, really. The younger serve the older. The older do not serve the younger. So in a sense, it's a future term of what is going to happen. When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red. I'm okay with being weird. Dr. Weird. The Hebrew word here, Admonai, probably not saying it right, but Admonai, is used only for David elsewhere in 1 Samuel 16. It may refer to skin or hair color. Admonai and the red food Esau requests from Jacob when giving up his birthright, which is here in a minute, called in Hebrew Edom. Red, both translated to English as red. It's connected by wordplay to the Hebrew word Edom, the name of the nation identified with the descendants of Esau. This is a bit of a puzzle. Patricia, you changed your name. I had just figured out, and you decided to change it. You could have done it sooner before I made myself look like a jerk several times. But I'm glad either way, because it's much easier now. This is a puzzle to me. So this is something also that if you want to be weird and you want to look into something that's kind of interesting, look into where red is translated in English here, and then it's also translated in from Hebrew to English in where is this? Down here somewhere. There you go. In 30. So in 24 and then in 30. And then if you cross-reference that with Numbers 20, you'll have to rewind later if you care enough. 1 Samuel 14:47, 2 Kings 8:22, and Obadiah 12 through 21, where there's this potential word play happening. And just look into it. It's a puzzle. It's interesting though. Parallelism with the Ishmael older. God, I hate YouTube. Always cuts this crap off for me. It's impossible. Hold on. Parallelism with the Ishmael older and Isaac younger story, perhaps. Perhaps that would be parallel conception then, or inception. Parallel inception, because that would be parallel on top of parallel, because there will already be a parallel running through this entire time. But that is interesting too. Yeah, potentially. I'd have to sit and think about it for a little bit. So it came out red. All his body,
Hey,
like
Joe.
yes.
I don't know if this is what they were intending, but like there's a lot of legends and stuff about the six-fingered people with red hair, like giants. I don't know if that's a connection or not,
Really?
but if you look up the color red in Hebrew, like I can't really find any type of like meaning or significance to it other than like blood or something like that.
What about? Okay, yeah, I'll have to look at it. I'm unaware of any. What is it? It's giant. So six-fingered people with red hair. I know
Yeah, like
the
a lot
six.
of Native American legends.
Oh, okay, because I know like in 2 Samuel, there's the giant with the six fingers, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
then I think that's it though, isn't it? In the
No,
Bible.
like Native American legend. Yeah, in the Bible, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to. I had no idea. That's something I don't know anything about. I definitely look into it though. Yeah. I guess so. On like the Hebrew end though, called Edom.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's interesting though. I'll look at that and then I'll see. I had no idea. I just know that 2 Samuel verse. Okay. Maybe that leads somewhere. Okay, so hairy boy. I think that's where we were. All his body like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Related to the prophecy that Esau would serve Jacob, because older in, 23, older shall serve the younger. His hand holding Esau's heel. So he's holding the younger. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them both. So again, also very old. Very, 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 very old. Just in general, very old. But very old for the time too. This, another, I guess, weird thing. If you look into some of the other literature around this time, outside of Judaism, and you look at like birth, I wouldn't call them stats, but it's like the best thing we had for stats at the time, which is just stories. You'll see like a big discrepancy in what is expressed ages of people. I think the Egyptians had some record of people living quite a long time, but a lot of the other cultures of the time, the ages were very different. And when you look at birthing age specifically, very, very different. So the Bible specifically kind of stands out pretty wildly in comparison to them, juxtaposed to the norm, which means this. God, I hate YouTube so much, which makes it easy to remember. Yeah, true. There's probably other significance that we're unaware of too. I think there's tons, honestly. When we get into 26, I think some of it'll become clear. But I think I'll shut up till we get there. It gets really interesting though. His hand holding Esau's heel, so his name is called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she Isaac was 60 years old when she bore, when his wife bore. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful full hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents, which is ironic because of the behavior of each. It's reversed. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. This is significant because there is a division at the home. Not only do you have this contention, at the very least, between the boys, you also now have a divide between the parents. Isaac had favor for Esau. Rebekah had a favor for Jacob, which doesn't directly play into anything, really. But subliminally, it plays into a lot later on. Esau sells his birthright. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew." That was that other one I referenced. "For I am exhausted." The Hebrew term that I'm not going to pretend I can pronounce is used elsewhere to describe severe drought. And that elsewhere is in Psalm and in Isaiah. So just interpretive note, because it could be interpreted either way. You have exhaustion here. I'd be interested to know if that was the same Hebrew word, because I doubt that it is. He was exhausted from the field. Maybe it is, but I would bet that it's not. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." It may make more sense for this to be in context of being severely thirsty, but maybe not, because we don't have a lot of reference points. Mine says famished. Okay. That would be my guess. This is not something I looked into. My guess would be this is a poor translation. But I could totally be wrong. I'd have to think about it more, honestly. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I am about to die," which is a bit dramatic. Otherwise, that's pretty exhausted. Exhaustion to almost death is pretty big. Does Edom mean exhausted or empty? Edom, let me see. We had it up here. The red food Esau requests from Jacob when giving up his birthright, called in Hebrew Edom. It's connected by wordplay to the Hebrew word Edom. Is that? No, that's not what that means, is it? I don't know. I want to look now, though. Hold on.
I actually don't know. I was just asking.
I don't think so. But now I'm curious. So multiple meanings. That's what. Okay, yeah. So red is one of them, and from what I understand, that's the most dominant used in the Bible. The Hebrew word Edom means red. It's also a rare masculine name of Hebrew origin. Interesting. The Hebrew Bible relates the word Edom to the name of Esau, the elder son of Isaac, who was born red all over, which we just read. The Tanakh describes the Edomites as descendants of Esau. Yeah, so it looks like no. Without looking any more into it than very surface level, it looks like no. Which makes sense with what we were looking at before with the mention of red.
So why does it say his name was called Edom? Like, who cares? Why is it saying that?
And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of the red stew, for I'm exhausted." Therefore, his name was called Edom. So I don't think it makes sense at all in context. I think they're kind of drawing on the previous statement of came out red. That it's like wordplay, which I get to a point, but it's still, I agree, it sounds kind of out of left field. I wonder if this is, I would be shocked if this is something that wasn't added later. And I think it probably made more sense to a different audience, would be my guess.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I have no idea. So if anybody else knows, feel free. But it was mentioned that it was wordplay. So the term Edom is connected by wordplay to the Hebrew for Admoni, which was came out red.
I kind of think it's a pun, but I don't know of what.
It very well could be, yeah. The Hebrew word used here, Edom, echoes the Hebrew word Admoni, right? Yeah, but so it's more of like the context that I think that Ghost is kind of saying, which, like I said, I'd be shocked if this bracket here was actually in any of the old texts. I think at some point it was added because of, like Ghost said, maybe it is a pun. Either way, though, I think it probably makes sense to the audience at that time, and it just makes no sense at all to us. Who knows? If anybody finds out definitively, I'd be curious to hear. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. I just want to briefly point out, this is the swear that I've been harping on for the past 3 weeks. This is the type of swear that is irrevocable, the type of swear that causes death in these cultures. Really, really, really big deal. Not the type of swear that we are used to. Absolute swear to death. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Okay. Here is when it happens. Spicy as fuck. Pay attention to parallels. They've already begun. It's been like a warm-up. Now it's like, if you have a pen and paper, I would love to see how many you can draw on. And then I want to talk at the end. So hopefully we should have a little bit of time. I really want to hear or read people's opinions of what this all actually means. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. This is the second famine in Genesis, because like it said, the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. I count one so far. And Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. Is that the same one that Abraham encountered previously? Lots of theories around Esau. Totally agree, Scott. Totally agree. A lot of wild theories around Esau, and then a lot of them that kind of make sense. Nevertheless, Abimelech, same one, different one, son of, perhaps. I feel like we never really get clarity with that. You just have to kind of figure it out through context clues and timelines. Either way, that's a parallel. Abimelech, king of the Philistines. It was a common name, to be fair, but I mean, come on. You can only say coincidence so long. And the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to you offspring all these lands." To your offspring, all these lands. "And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Yahweh appears to him, to Isaac. Parallel. Is it literal? Is it physical? Is it not? Because we've had a bit of both in Genesis so far. Then, the promise, the covenant, the foundation of Genesis past the garden has been the covenant. The covenant promise between Abraham and God, and then everything that kind of fills that gap. God is saying the same thing. The same thing that was said to Abraham is now being said, including the demand or command that he not leave the land. So the land is significant for sure, and that's just going to be harped on more and more and more and more. So Isaac settled in Gerar, when the men of the place asked him about his wife. He said, "She is my sister. She's my sister, baby girl. Here we go, round and round." For he feared to say, "my wife," thinking, lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. When he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of a window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. So a couple things obviously parallel, right? We've been here before, baby. We've been here a few times, actually. Abraham had this happen twice. So Isaac is now doing the same thing. Isaac is now with foreigners, and Isaac is lying out of fear. At least that's the simple answer. The other interesting thing is this in that it's different. Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, looked out a window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. Two things. One, this kind of indicates proximity, if nothing else, which is different than the story with Abraham, either of them. We didn't have this. This shows that Isaac was there, like living there, and relatively close by, probably. The other thing that is much more interesting is that the Hebrew word used in some of the earlier translations, which I can find if anybody cares, because I don't have it here, is wordplay on the name Isaac. The king's reaction suggests that whatever Isaac and Rebekah were doing was not mere laughter. And then in some of the earlier translations, the term, the English term, and I don't know what the Hebrew word is, I'd have to find it, fondling, was actually included in some of the earlier translations. So it would be, we're laughing and fondling his wife, was laughing and fondling his wife, which is much more honest. It's more descriptive because contextually you can tell that's what was happening, but we decided to kind of take that part out. Mine's caressing. Does it say that in a study Bible or does it say it in your actual translation? If it says it in the actual, like, props to whoever put that Bible out. It's one of the ones, like, it doesn't matter. Who cares? It's just like minorly aggravating that you take something out like that and then include all of this assault. I don't know what the hell I can say on YouTube now. All of the nastiness that is in the Bible. We have no problem with that. But if something says fondling, we're going to alter the text of the living word of God. Got it. Actual translation, good for them. Big props to whoever that is. So Abimelech called Isaac and said, "Behold, she is your wife. How then could you say, she is my sister?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought, lest I die because of her." Thought you'd kill me, bro. Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, had made sweet, sweet love to her. And you would have brought guilt upon us. You would have put us in a really crap position." So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." Parallel, parallel, parallel. In the NIV, that's surprising, but very good to hear. Very good to hear. Surely be put to death. And Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. Parallel. Remembering Abraham. He had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Parallel. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham, his father, which we will come back to later, because there will be further parallel. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we are." So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of the water that had been dug in the days of Abraham, his father. This indicates not only parallel of like what is happening, but parallel of where is happening. Parallel of geography, literally, damn near exactly, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given him. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdmen, saying, "The water is ours." Parallel. The same thing happened with Abraham. If you need to go read again, you can, but I promise you it's the case. The water is ours. So he called the name of the well Esek. Now, let me find this real quick. The Hebrew word Esek means contention, which makes sense, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he called its name Sitnah. The Hebrew word for enmity, Sitnah, is also used in Ezra 4:6 and nowhere else. As far as I could find, nowhere else. So twice. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, saying, "For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in this land." From there he went up to Beersheba, where Isaac went with Abraham when Abraham was gonna, I almost said do the deed, but that wouldn't come across the way that I wanted it to. When Abraham was going to put the knife to him. You know what I mean? So he's going back there. Went back up to Beersheba. And the Lord appeared to him. Parallel. So Yahweh appeared to Isaac at Beersheba as he did with Abraham. It's this pattern, but it's more than a pattern. It's repetitious, extremely, which is why I have the questions that I have when we get to the end. Yahweh said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you and will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake." Which is kind of beautiful if you think about it. God was so pleased with Abraham that he feels the need to mention him and draw a parallel of his own. So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. When Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzath, his advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his army, Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you?" I don't think they hated him. There was kind of some other stuff going on. That's a little bit of self-pity right there. Phicol was the same commander who accompanied Abimelech when the treaty with Abraham was made. Parallel. Good point about the whitewashing of the Bible for reasons not regarding translation or context. Right. That's the annoying thing. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Leave it. It's already super problematic. We don't need any help making it more problematic. So Phicol was the same commander that went with Abimelech when this was Abraham. Parallel. Isaac said to them, "Why do you hate me?" Blah, blah, blah. They said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you. We see what's going on, little brother." So we said, "Let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you." Interesting use of the term. Meaningful, I suppose you might say. "That you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace." Fair enough. "You are now the blessed of the Lord." So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths. Swear to death. Serious stuff. And Isaac sent them on their way. And they departed from him in peace. The same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. Which is interesting. Because think about that all the way through. Another swear, baby girl. It's all swears all day in the Old Testament. It's all swears and laws all day. But think about this. So we have found water. He called it Sheba. Therefore the city of the name is Beersheba to this day. One might question this, right? Real quick first. The name of the well, Shiva in Hebrew, sounds like the Hebrew term for oath, which is Shiva. Shiva was part of the name Beersheba, the place of this covenant, and the earlier one between Abimelech and Abraham. My, stupid brain swears, laws, and blood sacrifice, bro, all day. All day. Doesn't get better than that. My question is this, is like, because this aggravates me too, just about the whole way that we've put the Bible together. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. We found water. It's like the insinuation is that Beersheba got its name now, which is just, it's not accurate. Because if that's accurate, earlier accounts of Genesis are lies, or were filled later. So I look at it like this. When Abraham was here, they used the same name, Beersheba. But if we called it Beersheba because they found water here right now after Abraham's death. Therefore, the city of the name to this day is Beersheba. It means that what probably happened was, one, it was called something different earlier in Genesis, and then the author changed it by adding the proper name later, time traveling Israel. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Because I'm gonna like blubber trying to get it out. I assume everybody's smart enough to get what I'm saying. It means that it's not without edits and changes along the way. Like, there's just so much proof like this throughout the entire Bible, and it doesn't invalidate anything. It doesn't in any way make me like question anything. It just makes me question the process, not so much the content, is what I'm trying to say. But now I'm going to question the content. That all aside now. What do you guys think of the parallels? Because they're so eerily similar. They're so eerily similar. This whole thing with Isaac, including Abimelech, and including the commander by the same name, are did it happen? I guess. So just say it bluntly, did it happen? What is this history? Or was this a story that was meant to express something? Are we meant to be learning something? Or are we meant to take this literally? And it just so happened, like, I guess it's possible. All things are possible with God. But like, this was perfectly in line with what Abraham, down to like the process of Yahweh engaging with him in the right locations. Like, do you guys get what I'm saying? I don't question it. I don't really care. I wonder. Similar to like Beersheba. Don't care. It's irrelevant. But I wonder. When and where did the process get mixed up? Was it added later? Is this part just not true and they added it to make it sound good? Like, that's why we call it Beersheba. But as far as the parallels, like, I really wonder about this. I don't necessarily question it, like I said, but I wonder about it. I wonder if it's meant to express something else and not so much be a literal historical account of Isaac repeating what Abraham did. But I could also see the truth in that, potentially. Ghost said it reminds me of creation story told in a very realistic way. Most religions go overboard with their creation stories, like killing giant celestial bulls, etc. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. If it's not literal, what is the message? Like, what are they trying to get across? Because it could be a number of things. But this is what sticks me a lot of the time when I'm rolling through specifically the Old Testament, because it's just very, very, very different from the New Testament. How it's put together, the process, everything is very different. The genre is very different. This is the type of stuff that gets me kind of stuck up. And I just wonder. Because if not literal, and it's just a story, then you also have to account for, like, okay, well, what was Isaac doing then? Do we just not know what Isaac was actually doing? Does he have this whole other story that we just don't get to have because some author decided it would be a better story to put this down? Or did God want it that way? Is the story more important than the actual his story of Isaac? I don't know. But this is the crap that consumes my thinking for many days, years, and months. Days, months, and years. It's very hard. It's very hard. But it's something I wonder. I wonder what people think about it. I am very much unsure. I very much don't have a concrete opinion on it. I can see both sides. Patricia said, I think it's less about the historical context, more about the patterns and metaphors, but that's just my thoughts. Might change. So in that case, then, like, what do you take as the principle? Like, what is the principle? If it's not meant to be a historical account, why? What is the attempted lesson here? Could be literal with centuries of game of telephone shenanigans, or an elaborate metaphor told as an alt history Inglorious Bastards. I kind of consider something like that. I consider like it's an alternative story, alternative history. Game of Telephone, though. I mean, I suppose like part of me wonders if it was an actual mistake. To be totally transparent, I've thought about like the idea of maybe it was not intentional. Like maybe someone was missing something, but had enough and wrote this story because it connects, but it doesn't connect perfectly. It doesn't really add anything. We don't get anything extra. It's just kind of a reiteration. So there's like a very tiny cynical part of my brain that says like maybe it was a mistake. Because a lot of it is legal or legit history, but some isn't. Finding the line is near impossible without further discoveries, right? Which is kind of the crap place that we're all in. Also, it really messes with me that there are parts left out that we might need to know, and I don't gripe as much with the additions or distortions. Those can be fleshed out, but what if something is missing? That is the scariest part. That is like it's scary on several levels. Because one is like you have all of Christian culture telling you that this book is perfect and infallible and without mistake and everything that we're supposed to have we have, and it's just simply not true by any standard whatsoever that is not brainwashed. It's just not true. We are missing things. Things were changed. Things are redacted. The manuscripts all differ. We can't even agree on how to translate half the words. So to say the English audience of Christians has an infallible, perfect, without error book is on its face just a wildly stupid thing to say. Wildly stupid. Just on its face. But then when you get deeper into it, like the actual academics of theology and biblical scripture, you find a million more problems. So like not even just on its face, but all the way to the depth of the core of the Bible, there are issues. Which doesn't invalidate it, but for God's sake, just be honest about it. Just, yeah, it's not perfect. No, let's all try to figure it out the best we can and not be this delusional group of people who pretends like it is. The specific story, I feel the characters' personalities and stories are symbolic. I don't disagree with that. Yeah. Like most of the stories in the Old Testament. So do you take most of the Old Testament as history or most of the Old Testament as symbolism? Maybe I misunderstood that. Ghost said it's about fleshing out a family tree, divisions, ideas, etc. Which is probably the most likely answer. Is just the people, because if you really think about it, like the whole Old Testament, this isn't the only time something like this happens. You kind of get these dry or repetitive stories about certain people, and it does seem like a lot of the time they are just trying to kind of flesh things out. Like this is who they were, this is what they did. It's all relatively plain. A lot of it is repetitive, but like you need to know them, remember their name, remember who they're related to. That's the significance. I think it's probably the most likely answer, but I like to think about some of the more wild answers. Kelsey said it has to be symbolic for something, but I am scratching my head trying to figure it out. I don't disagree. I'm stuck in a place of, I think it's probably for the most part literal. I think for the most part historical. Definitely not accurate, not literally historical. But I think like the general story is meant to reflect that which was actually history. But I do think there's some reason for the parallel. Because nothing else in the Old Testament is exactly like this. This to the T repetitive. This is unique in that sense. A lot of the Old Testament has repetition in it, but nothing like this. Nothing like this. This does stand on its own and in how repetitive it is and how uniquely paralleled it is. So I feel like there has to be some significance to that. There has to be some significance to the just how parallel it is. I just honestly cannot figure it out. And I've spent serious time trying to figure it out. It's one of these things that, like Ghost said, I feel like I'll never be able to honestly develop an opinion without either doing gymnastics or we discover something new that adds context. Yeah, the stories echo each other and teach the same thing over and over. At the moment, mostly symbolism, but I'm not going to say that I'm right. I'm thinking this way, Interesting. So you think most of the Old Testament is symbolic? That's an interesting take. I'd say you're in the minority on that, which I like. Good for you. I don't agree, actually. I think a lot of the Bible is historical, but I don't think it's literal. So I think the distinction is important. I think a lot of it is historical, but maybe not half. So maybe actually, if I thought about it, maybe I do agree with you. But I think a good portion of the Old Testament is not literal. Sorry, it's historical. But I don't believe the stories in the Bible are literal. They're not. I don't believe they're exactly what actually happened. But I think they're historical in nature. Graves says real history. I'm sure some are real, but I take mostly as symbolism, especially. Well, Genesis, I'm 100% with you. Yeah. I don't think Genesis has a lick of literal anything in it. Glad you guys relate, Joe and Ghost. This is such a spiral topic for me. LOL. I don't think God is an editor, so we have what we have. He strikes me as more of a clean slate guy, hence Jesus. Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. I agree. I think God directs, he doesn't command. Or he doesn't command by force, I guess would be a better way to say that. I think he does command. But it's people. You're dealing with people, which is why the church is the just absolute crap show that it is. If God was forcing things the way they should be, I don't think anything would look the way that it does. If there's real history in the Old Testament, it's broken like telephone. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I don't think any of it is literal. I don't think anything happened exactly the way that the Bible says it happened. But I think general concepts and ideas of history are being reflected, or at least attempted to be reflected. But I think it's full of, dramatization, exaggeration. I think it's really hard to argue that. I was arguing with somebody about David and Goliath recently. And I'm like, I'm open to the idea of that story being literal, down to like the heights of the men, which are wild if you haven't actually read it with intention, and the way the story plays out. The guy I was arguing with was, the guy was having a very friendly conversation. He wasn't. He was having a very contentious conversation. His argument was that it was all literal. It was all exactly accurate. Every single word expressed in the story of David and Goliath was absolutely true and literal. And I'm like, dude, have you read the story? That's a wild story. I'm open to that being true, but in no part of me believes that is true. I think maybe the general thing happened. We had an underdog and some big ass dude who got taken out, but perhaps not. Because even if none of that happened, it's a great story. It has a great principle. It's a principle that has been used since the Bible was written, since before, probably. It's like it's a phenomenal principle. But as a literal story, I don't know. Maybe I'm just cynical, though. I've been told that from time to time. It will all make perfect sense in hindsight. Right. Just want to say hello. Just started listening. Not to Ruth. I think it can be both symbolic and literal at the same time, depending on the lens you are looking through. True in a sense, yeah. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but like the perspective of the author and the author, like their actual involvement is all that really matters, right? Like when an author writes a story, I guess in most cases, they know whether they're exaggerating, they know whether they're lying, they know whether they're adding something or retracting something. Like the author knows the truth of what is being written. They know whether it's fiction, they know whether it's as true as could possibly be coming from memory of the human mind. But that kind of dictates the truth of it, at least the intentional truth or intentional lie. So like something can have symbolism in it, but the events either happened or didn't, if that makes sense. Like the truth is the truth and history is history. And regardless of anything, how the stories were written in the Bible, the things either happened or they didn't. And they either happened the way they were written or they didn't. Or they happened partially how they were written, and the rest is dramatization, and it's kind of a mix. But what is literal is inarguable, and what was added is inarguably added. Like truth is truth objective. Our interpretation is the part that becomes difficult because we lack information. Patricia said, for sure, like I've been thinking about when God wiped out everyone, even women and children, I believe was probably traumatized. See, I don't know. Like those are the things that I take literally. Not all of them. Like I did a short recently on Ananias and Sapphira of the New Testament out of Acts, where they had sold their home, had told the apostles, Peter specifically, that the proceeds from the sale of the home would go to the church as like a tithe, essentially. And when they sold the home, they ended up selling it for more than what they thought. So what they did was they kept the overage of what they thought they were going to get paid. They gave the base amount that they thought they were going to get paid to the church, and Peter knew. So he called the husband out on it. The husband lied, and God struck him dead. Then the wife comes, and Peter asks her about it, and she lies. And Peter's like, sorry, sweetheart, but those who killed your husband are outside the door. So you're next. And then God struck her dead. And I actually take that as literal. For today. Always have. But I mean today. That could change for sure. Anything can change. But I take a lot of the smiting as pretty literal. I think God was a savage. And I have my own theories for why he's not anymore that are far beyond the scope of tonight. I find a lot of times in these stories, individuals represent entire cities or groups of people. Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I definitely see some of that. I see some of that. And when we get to some of those, I'll point them out. Ghost said, I find a lot of time. Oh, that was Ghost. Okay, yeah, I totally agree. As we read through the Old Testament, I'll point the ones out that I think that's the case for, where the individuals represent the entire city or groups of people. Ghost also said, we see hints of it with Jacob having his name changed. I think it happens in other religions and myths too, like Greece, North. Yeah, it absolutely does. Damn, that changes things. The Old Testament makes my heart hurt. The New Testament does too, though. You just have to read it. The New Testament is savage too. It's just not as overtly savage. Mikkel said, in Ghost, I can't stop seeing the image of the angel blowing the huge mountain, all ablaze and thrown into the sea as a cyclical recurrence. I don't know. Is that based on that conversation in Discord from a while back? Ruth said, Joe, did they teach in your schooling that some of the Bible was not literal, especially these Genesis stories? Hell no. They taught it all as literal. All of it was literal. The real answer, though, is they wouldn't say. They wouldn't say. The Genesis thing was one that I specifically took to seminary numerous times and was like, I would like to have this conversation because I just don't see how this makes sense. And I bring like old Hebrew stories and other like Mesopotamian creation story and a few others of the time. And I had a whole, dossier of my argument against Genesis being literal. And I took this to seminary and I tried to have an honest conversation with people, and they would not have the conversation. They would just literally say, which is why I'm so turned off from like Christian culture. They would just literally say, the Bible is the inerrant word of God. Everything in it is true and accurate. And I'd be like, but what about this right here that I have for you? Very organized and nice, and little paper protectors. What about all this? Can we talk about this? No. It's all true. You don't question the Bible. It's accurate. It's infallible. No. Ghost said, yeah, Mikkel, I personally think a lot of these stories are explaining subatomic laws. When we catch up technology, one-to-one comparisons will be much easier. Oh, God. The depth of all that. Kelsey said, what I mean is the story itself may be literal, but the choice of words, phrases, expressions chosen to tell the story may be chosen intentionally for symbolic purpose. Oh, okay. For symbolic purposes, if that makes sense. Yeah, it totally makes sense. That's true in a lot of it, for sure. And a lot of it for the same, in the same way is like, is dramatic and theatrical and exaggerated. But yeah, word choice, the way something is phrased, expression, for sure, for sure. Same with exaggeration and dramatization and addition, you know, spicing things up. Like there's a lot of that. It's pretty obvious. But yeah, I get what you're saying now. I totally agree. Patricia said that's mainly why I left my old church. Exactly that. Based on a true story. Yeah, based on a true story. It's a better way to say it. Based on a true story. Now, in school, they wouldn't entertain anything, really. I had one theology teacher who was pretty all right. He would, like, debate me and stuff. Beyond him, though, it was garbage. It's absolute garbage. With respect to all of them, but it was total trash. Total trash. Don't go to seminary. It's the greatest advice I could ever give to anybody. It's the biggest waste of money ever. You can learn so much more doing stuff like this right here. We are learning more right now than I ever learned in seminary. There is no doubt. Elle, do you still have it laminated? Ever go back to those questions? If so, have you changed your mind on any of it in favor of literal? No, actually, I've just gotten worse. To be honest, the more I've learned, the further away from the literal I've gotten. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And I've even tried to convince myself. But I just can't do it. Can't do it. To answer the first, I don't think I still have any of it. With all due respect, you garbage. I've tried with a lot of the stuff, like within Christianity and the Bible specifically, to like be, to be the Christian guy, to like adhere to the traditional Christian views of things, especially when I was working in the church, because I was always the dude sitting to the side being like, what? That makes no sense. What are you talking about? This is really dumb. I can't get on board with this. All I'm doing is sitting here and like kind of disliking all of you this entire time. I was always that person, and I thought it was just me. I thought, like, do I not believe enough? Like, do I even believe at all? Am I still an atheist and just like, I want to believe that this shit is true? And it took me some time to finally get to a place where it's like, no, I just don't believe the bullshit. I just don't believe the things that are apparently not true, like obviously not true. I just don't believe the things that like church culture pushes. And it helped so much when I found a very few select people like that theology pastor or teacher in seminary, because I started meeting with him outside of school. We'd like get coffee and talk. When I met a few key people like that, and they're like, no, you're not crazy. Like, Christian culture is cringy. It's very gross. But do you believe this? And I'd be like, yeah. Do you believe this? I'd be like, yeah. This, yeah. I'd be like, okay, well, you're good. Like, you just don't believe in the bullshit fog machine culture of Christianity. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm okay with that. He's like, it just means you shouldn't work at a church. Done. No problem. No problem. It's a weird place to not fit in with the world and not fit in with most Christians. But you got to take up your cross. Right, but it's why like things like this need to happen. And hopefully things like this become in-person things in certain places. I would love nothing more than to have like a local church. It's just like, it's difficult because there's just so few of us. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel. But it'd be great to have this in person. Like a regular church that was just not bullshit and just honest and people trying to learn and being open. It just doesn't really exist that I'm aware of. Ghost said, I used to go to Bible study at a Baptist church. Oh, God. A few years ago, when I brought up spirit can be a synonym for idea, they were super offended. I stopped going. I could totally see that. I could totally see that. It's like, that's the problem. Why not just be like, huh, I don't agree, and then move on? Or, huh, I've never thought about that. I'm going to look into that. I'm going to think about that. I think you're wrong, but I'm going to think about it. Instead, it's like, get the fuck out of this church. You cannot stay here. Don't ever say that to anybody else. Please put the hood on as you leave this property. Pastor said it's the truth of salvation in the form of clues. That's well said. Yeah, that's absolutely true. No literal. No literal. I like that approach. Sounds about right. That's why we are the remnant. Yeah, right. That makes you feel a little bit better. The whole remnant thing. There's a little bit of solace in that. Or even if they don't tell you to leave, they just immediately shut your idea down. Yeah, I mean, they shut it down, or they look at you weird, or you don't get invited to a thing next time, or, behind your back, they're putting blocks up so that if you try to sign up for, I saw that all the time. Saw church staff putting blocks, like red flagging people who had said something that doesn't agree with their theology, redlining them in the system, so that if they tried to sign up to like lead a youth group or something, they wouldn't allow them to do it. That kind of thing. And like on one hand, there needs to be some cohesiveness within the church. Otherwise, it could become problematic unless you do it like how we do it, where it's just open. Believe what you want. Like, do you believe in these 3 fundamental things that make you a Christian? Yes? Cool. We don't really care about anything else. I'm unaware of that existing anywhere but online. But I would die for that to be a physical church. That would be the greatest thing ever. Where it doesn't matter. You'd have your Baptists, maybe a couple Catholics who didn't want to deal with the BS from the Catholic Church anymore, a bunch of Protestants, like everybody just coming in being like, do you agree with these 3 things? The definition of Christian. Do you fit the literal definition? Yes? Okay, cool. Then we're good. You just need to take this open-minded approach if you're going to lead groups, because like leadership would need to be, it'd be hard to do, but it's definitely possible. I just don't know that exists. But I don't think there will be any change until that becomes the norm. And I don't think that will ever become the norm, which is why I've lost hope for Christianity as a system. Allah said it feels like there are a few of us who are willing to have these conversations regardless of where you stand on the Christian spectrum, but it's way more people than you think, Joe. I hope you're right. I mean, I've obviously met tons through like social media stuff. Instagram is really, really busy. YouTube was before, I moved to this channel. So I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, and I know like a lot of people agree. But even getting those people to like join an online group, it's like they're not interested. So I wonder if you were to plant a physical church, like where I live, how many people in proximity of the church are that open-minded? Like, would it ever succeed? Is more what I meant. I know we exist, and I know we exist in like relatively high numbers probably, but I wonder about proximity for it to ever become like a local gathering. But I totally agree. I think there's a lot that are all over the spectrum. And if nothing else, there are so many people who are disenfranchised from the church as a system that like there are a lot of just people who hate the church at this point, but like in their heart believe what they believe. They just have nowhere to go. Having a physical church, Ghost said, with people open like us would require maximum gatekeeping though. Right. Which is possible. It'd just be difficult. You'd have to have a solid staff of people like monitoring things. You just have to have a really good leadership. And not like just the pastor, but like all of leadership would need to be really strong. But it could totally work. Coach said, I think that kind of curiosity and desire to learn should be nurtured because those people end up having such strong testimonies because they didn't just drink the Kool-Aid. They want to understand it. Totally agree. The strongest people I've ever seen in faith are the people who are completely disenfranchised from Christianity. Because I've never met someone like us who, like, I love Hillsong. I listen to Hillsong sermons every Sunday. I've never met that person, and maybe they exist, but I would rather die than listen to a sermon from Hillsong. I'd rather die. Stephen Furtick, I'd rather die. Personally, you can gouge my eyes out and stick knives in my ears. I would rather die, because it is just not true, unless something is dramatically changed. Because people who have looked past the surface can no longer live on the surface, is the way that I see that. The people who have gone beneath into the depth will, like, never be satisfied with the surface ever again. And they'll see the lies on the surface, and they'll see the inconsistencies on the surface, and they will never be able to listen to it ever again. That is my total opinion, but I'm allowed to have it. It definitely needs to be cultivated. I mean, I think it'd be phenomenal. I just think logistically it's a difficult thing to try to figure out. Problem is, no one wants to be wrong, and Christianity has been traumatic to most people who identify as Christians, so in person isn't as realistic as the gratifying church experience we know and love. I guess. I mean, Christians being traumatized is for sure true, but, like, it's Christians who are traumatizing Christians. I don't know. I think you could do a lot of the same stuff. I think you could still, like, do worship if you wanted to. I just don't personally, like, see the point. But that's my cynicism. But you could definitely still do it, and then I view it like this. If I were to actually literally plant a church, it would be like 20 minutes of me presenting a topic or reading something, and then it would be microphones all around. Like, there'd be a panel every week where, like, you signed up the week before, and then you were on that panel that next Sunday. And you had a couple people in case someone doesn't show up or get sick or whatever, on the bench. But you have a panel, and I present the topic for like 20 minutes. I give some context and background. The people who signed up they knew ahead of time, like, what the topic was. And then it's panel. There's 5 people, 8 people, whatever. Like, we discuss it. And then at the end, people who are sitting can, like, chime in, and that's your hour. That's how I've always kind of, like, fantasized about it. Like, that's the way to do it. Small conversation between a group of people, and then open to anybody who just, like, has to ask a question or whatever. Can't appreciate the good without being immersed in the evil at some point. Sadly true. That sounds like the best church in the world, Joe. I think so. I think it would be phenomenal. It excites me to think about. Al said, same on the Stephen Furtick and Hillsong shit, but those people can easily be disenfranchised and are potential converts to a true relationship with Christ. It just takes a certain level of discomfort. It's well said. That's well said. You're totally right. You're totally right. I think it will happen. I just think it will be extremely slow. I think it'll just be extremely slow. Because I just don't see enough people who are like us, like, on social media, like, with a voice, I guess. I don't see enough people like us who are loud. I know there are a lot of us. I don't see a lot of them being super loud and, like, popular. So I just think it'll be very slow, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just a thing. Patricia said, everybody sits in a circle and we hold a talking stick. Actually, that's exactly how I picture it. Is my wife did that with the guys who worked for her. She had a football, and these guys were technicians and were obnoxious at times, but I love them, in case for some reason any of you guys see this. But she would hand around a football, and it was the talking football, and she embarrassed a bunch of not old, but grown men, because they were not allowed to talk if they were not holding the talking football. So I actually am not opposed to the talking stick idea, because it helps people not talk over each other. I said, right, Ghost, can't tell you how often I wish Joe had a church in my area, but technically he doesn't. It's in my hand. Discomfort is a catalyst for growth, pretty much universally, right? It's the same old thing of, like, you will eventually get so uncomfortable with the way that your life is in whatever context that you will break, and then something will dramatically change. There just has to be a catalyst. What worries me is that there are so many people in the world who will live in discomfort for so freaking long. For so long. They'll just do the same shit over and over and over again and be uncomfortable and be unhappy and just keep doing it over and over again. That worries me too. So I feel like there needs to be a way to break into those people. Otherwise, you just keep going on the merry-go-round. That's why church people are super comfortable and their beliefs never grow. Yeah, it's stagnation. It's one of like these really stupid quotes that I really like is it comes from like the addict world, like recovery, not actively doing drugs. You're never standing still. You're always either moving forward or moving backward. And I like that because I just think it's true. I think in whatever you do or trying to achieve or whatever, I think like being at a standstill is going backwards. If you're not propelling forward and making progress, you are going backward. You're not staying where you're at. It's loss of momentum. Can you imagine getting stuck in kindergarten for life? That's actually really sad to think about because that's exactly what that is. That's baby Christian for life. Baby believers. Patricia said another silly quote. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Yeah, that's another like really popular addict quote. But it's absolutely true. It's the whole definition of insanity. You're gonna do the same thing over and over again and expect something different to happen. Like you're delusional. You're insane. That's insane. Literally, it's insane. And I fear like that's the normal Christian. They're living in insanity. They're going to church every week and maybe even going extra and like doing the small group on Tuesday and going to the thing on Saturday. But like they're not moving anywhere in what they believe because they're getting preached the same old tired motivational shit and not like actual education. They're not learning anything. They're not questioning anything. They're just like, oh, that's the truth. Got it. I'm good. How do you grow from that? Then all the social media and other people they talk to, anything that conflicts with what they were taught, like that reels in their head because they have no reference point of being like, no, that's BS because I know this, this, and this. So I know this is what I believe. They just hear all these things and their brain ping pongs back and forth because they have nothing to grip onto. It's just, it's ricochet in there. I feel like that's most of the world. Okay, yeah, that's fair. In and out of Christianity, it's most of the world. Most men are men children, and many women have lost their way. Just a bunch of grown-ass kids running around this earth now. That's part of the beast system right there. That's uncomfortably true too, isn't it?
Hey, Joe.
Yo.
Do you think it's possible to wake people up or to get them kind of like to think about things a little deeper on a mass scale, or do you think it has to be like one by one?
I think it's progressive, personally. So I think it begins one-on-one, and then I think once you have volume, I think you can affect masses, personally. Because that's
Yeah, that
kind
makes
of
sense.
what happened too. Like if you think about it, that's kind of the way like Christianity spread. It was very small, and then you get enough people. But if you think about it in any context, like how does a band get big and influential? They start very small, then their whatever you call them, their gatherings grow and grow and grow, and then eventually it's like they're number one on the Billboard. I think it's just like it's the whole social media game. It's like if you have 500 followers, nobody cares about you. If you have 1,000, like a few people will care about you, but still most people won't. Once you hit 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, even if like what you're putting out isn't even that good, people are going to listen due to status. So I think whether it's for like good reasons or not, I think once you get the few on a singular level to like really believe whatever it is, and then you have volume of people, I think people will listen regardless of what the message is, whether it's good or bad. Like I think a lot of bad stuff happens that way too, but that's my opinion of it.
I wonder where we're at on that bell curve. Like, if it is exponential, are we like, have we peaked, or is there still room
Like
when
in
you take
terms
everything
of
into account?
like Christianity moving.
Yeah, because it kind of seems like there's a net loss with it. Like we are getting new people in, but there's a net loss. It seems like, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, this is a couple months old, but at least last time I checked, like the numbers of Christians are still going down in America, in Canada, and in Europe. It's like that number's still going down. But in other places like Africa, it's fucking booming. But like say first world, America, Canada, Europe, and then the rest of them. The number's going down, but I am of the opinion that the quality of the individual is going up. I think, and being the cynic that I am, I think it kind of says something. But I definitely have more conversations like we have with random people. And granted, like it's social media, but still more than ever. More than ever. So I think the numbers are going down statistically, but I want to believe, anecdotally at least, but I think the quality of the individual, like they're people who really believe but have questions and are like not afraid to ask the questions and not afraid to say that they don't agree with something, which is nice to see. So I'd like to say, but I think there's a lot more pain to come. I think the church is going to collapse, personally. Maybe not like totally, but I think the numbers now are really bad. I think they're going to get a hell of a lot worse. But then I think like from the rubble, the phoenix will rise. I think the select people who were like kind of here in the shadows the whole time will rebuild it. And maybe that's my fucking like movie perspective of it, but I kind of see it as literal.
What do you think the church collapsing looks like practically?
Ooh, good question. So the way I've like projected this in my mind is that I kind of look at it like banks collapsing, where I think all of your kind of small local churches that are dependent on very few large donors, because at the end of the day, it's a business. I harp on that, but like that's all that it is. A church is just a business. No church stays open without functioning exactly like a business. So it fails like a business. Once the income is the people. So if the people start leaving, the income goes down. Once they're red, they can only last so long. And if the church starts losing fundamental donors, which almost every church survives based on, I think it's less than 7% of its attendees. So if you lose 3 of the 7% that are the majority of your tithe, your church is dead. It's just a matter of time, unless you're able to replace them. So what I think will happen, like collapse-wise, is I think the smaller churches, just like the smaller banks, will no longer be able to pay the bills. And I think they will close down. I think some might meet in public, and some might, go to the movie theater or whatever. But the actual institution will collapse. And then I think it will lose faith. People will start to lose faith in the system, just like they do in banks. The more banks collapse, the more people withdraw their money. So even people who are at other churches are like, shit, well, is this church next? Why did they collapse? Like, how does God let this happen? Like all the crappy theology begins to rise of how could this happen if God is real? And they start questioning all their faith. So I think a lot of the weak Christians will bail, which is just insurmountable amount of revenue, just fleeing the church. And if any of them are key donors, that church is dead. So I think that'll be like the dominoes falling over. And I think at the end, it'll be the mega churches that survive because they're so thick in brainwashing. I think they'll be able to keep enough people. Some might have to downsize, but like Stephen Furr, I could see him staying open just as normal, personally. But it becomes like it's like the Antichrist at that point. It's like this perspective of Christian that's not, and everybody knows it, and it just keeps masquerading like that. But that's kind of how I picture it. I would love to see them collapse too, but I just they're so massive, dude.
But I think when they collapse, like all the wacky religions are gonna start cropping up because people are still like curious about spiritual things.
For sure. I think it'll be rampant. It'll be paganism all over again. Thousands of different belief systems stemming off of all sorts of new age stuff. Yeah, totally.
I mean, we're kind of already seeing it with like dudes like Billy Carson and
Yeah.
all of his clones out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like different forms of Christianity will pop back up too. But I think when things really collapse, I think people will flee from the name of Christ personally. And I think it will become like all of these different hooky booky religions and tarot cards and odd new age spirituality and things like I think psychedelics and spirituality will get really, really big, just the way that that's already kind of happening. But I think like the name of Jesus Christ will be fleed from as things get really bad. I think it'll become like a like I don't know, like maybe even to the point where people become persecuted for attaching themselves to the name. I don't know.
You can kind of already see the seeds of it happening on social media. Like if you even say Jesus, people freak out. So
Yeah, I agree. It's like there's hints of all of it, in my opinion. So I've kind of like tried to play out the sequence of possibility, and that's kind of the way I see it. But yeah, I think I think it's going to collapse. I think it's going to collapse. I think eventually there will be persecution again, and I think during the interim there, weird religions will become very, very popular, and Christianity will become something that is only the mega churches, and therefore everybody hates it who's not a part of it. And I think it'll be pretty small, like a select few of them that just are too big to die, the Walmarts and the Amazons of the industry. It's horrific to think about. It's but I mean, it is what it is.
it doesn't really seem reversible either. So, I mean, I guess you're right. I think that's probably what's going to happen.
I think it's got to burn, metaphorically, or I think it's got to burn. I think the whole thing just, it's like it's too contentious. The Christians hate the Christians. It's like, how do you save that? Everybody hates the Christians. The Christians hate each other. Like, there's no reconciling that. Unless something truly godly, like a miracle, happens. But I don't see that happening. I just don't see how you reconcile something.
Like a second coming, possibly.
Right, yeah. But I don't think that'll happen. I think that'll be after. I think the remnant will rebuild, and then I think that will happen. In the midst of it or at the end of it. But I don't.
So, could
don't see it
you
happening
explain
before.
that a little bit? How does a remnant rebuild if they're scattered?
So I see it kind of like what we're, and not like comparing us to that or anything, but like literally logically. This is a very small group of people that met through odd means for the most part, and then drew together through like one central thing. In our scenario, like me being on the internet is the central thing. That is the thing that brought all of these very unique, special, intelligent people all together. I think it will be something similar to that, whether it's a person or an idea or whatever. But I think very small groups of people will be drawn together through something, and then they'll build something themselves, and then those things will connect at some point, like a spider chart. And then I kind of see that as being the collective remnant. But I don't necessarily think they're all going to be together completely ever, or maybe like at the true end, possibly. But I truly see like the church completely burning metaphorically into nothingness, and only prosperity preaching being the only thing that survives. And I don't know why, but it's just like feeling the prosperity preaching will be the only thing that exists of Christianity at some point. Paganism will run rampant, Satanism, Luciferianism, all rampant. And then there will be these very odd, like secretive groups of people who are meeting similar ways like we do, which can be done in private. And then they just grow from there. That's kind of how I see it. And maybe they connect someday and make the whole, or maybe they don't, and they all function kind of individually as like separate cells or something. I don't know.
So the remnant, what are we orbiting? Like just the idea of seeking and loving your neighbor and just being good people? Like there has to be something central that we're kind of orbiting.
I mean, this might sound stupid, but like literally just actual Christian, like the definition of the word, not following Christ. So like the tenets of Christianity, like what church was in the beginning, and died quickly, but what church should have stayed the whole time? Like we have a central figure that all of us at least say we believe is God. Like that's kind of enough. So beyond that, I don't know, outside of what we're doing, which is like trying to learn the truth and understanding more. The only other thing that I've kind of thought about is like, after playing out this whole apocalyptic thing, there'd be a lot to kind of have to deal with at that point. So like, depending on what's going on in society, if Christianity truly burns and everything just becomes so scattered, and you have paganism running the world and Satanism, Luciferian, like society definitely isn't healthy, and there's probably a ton of really wicked, weird shit going on. So there would be a lot for like that group to do, is how I see it. So the ones that are local would have like things to do. There would be, you know, missions to be done. And even the ones that are not local, I assume if the internet's still functioning, like they'd be pushing the tenets of Christianity and trying to pull people in. But like the true tenets, the things that we know for sure, the essential things. And it would be people who completely ignore all of the bullshit that Christianity became obsessed with later. But I see it like maybe saving culture, unless culture's too far gone. If culture's too far gone and we know like second coming is imminent, then it's like preparation for that. Then it's the question of, once the remnant's there, is that the remnant, or can people still be one? Like at that point, is the remnant doing like secret missionary work in a world that has outlawed Christianity and is persecuting them or whatever? Are they doing missionary work online? Are they doing missionary work in person? Like, are they pushing the gospel?
I mean, that's what happens in China.
Massively, yeah, and other places.
Right.
So is that
so it could be something like that globally.
Right. But like I've heard the argument of like at that point, you know, the deal is done. Like those are the ones who will be saved and everybody else is effed. I don't personally buy that, but it's whether I believe something or not, I'm going to think about it. So that's kind of the other perspective is, but I think there will still be people to be saved. I think that will be kind of the fundamental purpose of the group, is to draw others in and try to build from there.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I think of the gather them and put them in my barn verse, whatever the barn is. Like, if we're scattered, we have to be gathered in some way. It doesn't have to be like supernatural or anything. It could just be, I don't know, some way.
Right.
It's going to have to, it requires communication on some level. So I just try to go through all the scenarios, you know. I'm not very optimistic about it, but.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I'd hope that like it would be local, or at least some of it I would imagine would be local. But I think a lot of it honestly will probably be online. I think it'll be like groups of people meeting privately, and depending on how bad society is and like if there's persecution, it'll be people meeting online in private, like running off of, you know, private servers and things. I don't. I'm not optimistic either though, so I totally understand. Amos 5:13. Therefore, the prudent keep quiet in such times, for the times are evil. I just love the fact that you used an Amos verse. That's badass. Ruth said, I got to go in a few minutes, guys. Ruth said, the only bills my tiny church has is electric, water, and gas. Right. So if your pastor doesn't have a salary, no church staff has salary, they run on volunteers, you know, overhead is low. So like, it's very likely those churches survive. And maybe they are a part of the remnant, right? Where all the churches who broke the tenets of Christianity by having this wildly inflated overhead as a business will die. You know, mark my words, they will die. But churches like Ruth's, they will survive. And I could totally see that as being like, that is a local piece of the remnant. And then they will draw people in and draw people in and draw people in. Total, you know, my opinion, not based on anything. As said, the church I'm currently going to is pretty big, and I'm like skeptical of their finances. If the church will not show you their financials, do not go to the church. You are allowed to ask a church to see their financial statement. If they look at you weird, it is a church you don't want to be at. Baby girl, run away. Run away. I worked at a church that would not show it. We saw it because we worked there, but they would not show the congregants. And then I worked for a very short time in a church that always did. Every month they showed the financials, and I loved them. They had their own problems, but I loved that they did that. There was absolute transparency, and it was really healthy for the people that went there. It's not a mega church, but it's got like 150 members or something like that. It's pretty small. I mean, it's not small, but it's not like, you know, big. The internet may not be around at that time. Right. I've thought a lot about that. Yeah. Which would dramatically change things, right? Or if you don't get the mark, you don't. But think, like, if we lose the internet, honestly, play that all the way out. If we lose the internet, the apocalypse has begun. Like, it's on. If we lose internet access or cell phone coverage, the world is immediately changed. Overnight. We lose everything. Transportation, communication, everything's gone. Like, we move into apocalyptic living literally the next day. People are killing each other the next day. Because there's just no way to run a society the way that we have it set up if that is the current state of things. If we can't communicate the way that we do, there's no way. I suppose that love overcomes the great changes that exist now. You are so positive. I love you so much. Because now I'm like super doom and gloom in my head. They did email out their whole budget, so I have to check that out. Right, but a budget is different than a financial statement. Just so we're clear. A budget is how they want to spend their money. And maybe they'll show the numbers, but usually they don't. A financial statement is how much money they're getting. It's a different thing, for sure. That's right, Pia, the intimacy, compassion, and agape love, baby. All right, guys, I gotta roll. This was nice, though. This was nice and very depressing, but very good. It's the type of stuff you gotta think about, I guess. It's very interesting stuff to think about. And it is what it is. Like, you at least want to have an idea of what things are going to be like. Be ready. In quick news, so it looks like the schedule will stay. So Thursday will stay Apocrypha. Tuesday, I'm hoping for next week to start. Tuesday would be the topic discussion. If not next week, then the week after. But that would give us Sunday night, Tuesday night, Thursday night. Brief heads up that I might have to change the time of all the streams to later. So I'm very sorry if that inhibits anybody's ability to come. But I might no longer ever be home at 6 o'clock Central Time. So it may be so far as to like be 8 o'clock Central Time, but I will keep it as early as possible. But just like
I won't be around next Tuesday, but I will the following Tuesday.
Okay, cool. Well, then maybe I'll just default to that then. That gives me a little bit more time. So yeah, just heads up. Time might change to later. So if later is better for you, awesome. If it's not, I'm very sorry. But it's uncontrollable for me. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Not this coming week, for sure. The following week, if not this week. But for sure, at least.
You got any topics that you're thinking of?
Yeah, there was one that Elle gave us that I have here written somewhere. But it was from a stream. I'm not going to be able to find it right now. I have two, though. Two at least. But what I'll do is throw probably 5 to 10 out in a poll and let you all kind of tear it apart. And if you guys have any too, didn't we make like a channel for this at some point, or a thread? Yeah, we did.
Threads are getting a little cluttered, but I think we did.
Oh, this is the Apocrypha. Yeah, I feel like we did at some point. Maybe we need to clean these up. All right, well, here's what I'll do. I'll make a new thread. I'll try to clean this crap up at some point. I'll make a new thread. The Thursday night, because there's a handful of you who have not been there. It's like any topic, preferably like theology, biblical, history. But I mean, we're open to other stuff, so whatever. But a topic that we can talk about for like an hour ish. They usually go later. Some things if you want like inspiration. Let me pull this real quick. If we're done, so if you have stuff to do, please go. But shoot, where is it? Oh, here. Okay, so I want to see what the actual definition was. We go to here. If you go to Tattooed Theist YouTube and you go to lives and you go down a bit, you'll see these. And these were all like examples. So souls, spirits, and the body debate. We talked about just like, what is a soul? What is a spirit? They were extremely complicated because of Ghost. So if you want to have your mind completely racked, you can go watch those. We talked about the Great Reset at one point. Christians being pacifists. We talked about modesty. Is modesty dead? Should women still be modest? Do men need to be modest? Culture versus the church. I think that kind of is self-evident. Who was Jesus? Like the character. Oh, there's Cat. The character of Jesus Christ. Who was he? How did he act? What were his principles? Why did Rome fall? What is Sheol? Who is Satan? Quran versus the Bible. Like, these are the kinds of things. So I'm sure anybody would be happy to repeat any of these too. So if any of these seem super interesting to you, aliens and UFOs, the Fibonacci sequence, spells and sorcery, that was the one I was talking about the other day. Any topic. I'm going to make a thread for Tuesday topics. And you guys can just drop ideas in here. And then I will randomly pick a handful of them every week, put them in the announcements. You guys vote on them, and then we're good to go. So I will get that all set up, and then I'll tag everybody in it. Have a lovely night. I am going to bed. Love you, love you, love you, love you. Goodbye. Thank you, man. Thank you.